Harlan David Sanders was born on September 9, 1890, in the small rural community of Henryville, Indiana, USA. The America he was born into was still a largely agricultural society. Automobiles were a novelty, electricity was rare outside big cities, and the average American lived and worked on farms. Henryville itself was a quiet settlement surrounded by cornfields, dirt roads, and a tight-knit community where everyone knew their neighbors. Harlan's father, Wilbur David Sanders, was a hard-working man who farmed small plots of land and occasionally took jobs at local sawmills and factories to make ends meet. His mother, Margaret Ann, was of Irish descent, known for her strict discipline and practical approach to life. The Sanders family was not wealthy. They lived modestly in a simple wooden house with a vegetable garden and a chicken coop out back. When Harlan was just 6 years old, tragedy struck the family. In 1896, his father died suddenly from complications of a severe fever. This loss devastated the family both emotionally and financially. Margaret Ann, now a widow with 3 young children, had no choice but to find work outside the home. She secured employment at a local tomato canning factory, working long shifts for meager pay. With his mother gone most of the day, young Harlan took on a role that was unusual for boys of his age at the time. He became the primary caregiver for his younger brother and sister. This meant not only looking after them, but also preparing their meals. Standing on a wooden stool in their small kitchen, Harlan learned to fry, bake, and roast with whatever ingredients were available, often simple fare like bread, milk, and garden vegetables, occasionally supplemented by chicken or pork when the family could afford it. Harlan later said that these years taught him 2 things: responsibility and the importance of making food taste good, even when resources were scarce. "You make do with what you've got," he would say, "but you don't have to make it plain." His formal education was short-lived. By the age of 10, Harlan left school to work full-time, a common reality for poor rural families at the turn of the century. His first jobs included farm labor, painting horse-drawn carriages, and working as a streetcar conductor. He developed a reputation for being reliable but restless, moving from one job to another in search of better pay or simply out of curiosity. In 1906, at the age of 16, Sanders lied about his age to enlist in the U.S. Army, serving briefly in Cuba as a wagon driver. Although his military career lasted less than a year, it instilled in him discipline and a sense of pride in wearing a uniform, something that would later influence his decision to adopt a distinctive personal style as a businessman. After returning to civilian life, Harlan drifted through a wide variety of occupations: locomotive fireman for the Illinois Central Railroad, insurance salesman, ferryboat operator on the Ohio River, and even a short-lived stint as a law student. Each job added to his life experience, though none provided lasting stability. By the late 1910s, Sanders was working for the Michelin Tire Company in Winchester, Kentucky, as a salesman. In 1920, he purchased a ferryboat business, which he ran successfully for several years before selling it for a profit. That deal gave him his first real taste of entrepreneurship, the sense of control, risk, and reward that comes with owning a business. In the 1920s, America was experiencing a period of economic growth known as the Roaring Twenties. Automobiles were becoming more common, roads were being improved, and roadside businesses were beginning to emerge to serve the growing number of travelers. Sanders recognized that the future of business lay in serving this mobile population. Although he didn't yet know it, these developments would later create the perfect environment for his fried chicken to reach millions. By 1929, the year the Great Depression began, Sanders had settled in Kentucky and was managing a Shell oil service station in Corbin. It was here, in the humble back room of a gas station, that the seeds of the KFC empire would soon be planted. In 1930, as the Great Depression tightened its grip on America, unemployment soared and countless businesses closed their doors. Yet it was in this harsh economic climate that Harlan Sanders would take the first decisive step toward building what would later become Kentucky Fried Chicken. At 40 years old, Sanders was managing a Shell oil service station in Corbin, Kentucky, a small town located at the intersection of U.S. Route 25 and U.S. Route 25E. The location was strategic. It lay along one of the main north-south routes through the Appalachian Mountains, frequented by travelers, truck drivers, and salesmen. The service station was modest: 2 fuel pumps, a small office, and a living space in the back where Sanders resided. From the outset, Sanders saw an opportunity beyond simply selling gasoline. Travelers on long road journeys often needed more than fuel. They needed a hot meal. Corbin had few dining options, and Sanders' own love for cooking made the idea of serving food seem natural. At first, he prepared simple dishes for himself and a few guests, using the kitchen in his living quarters. Soon, word began to spread that the fellow at the Shell station made surprisingly good food. Sanders' earliest menu was a reflection of rural Southern cooking: country ham, green beans, biscuits, and of course, fried chicken. His fried chicken was unlike the heavy, greasy version served in many roadside diners. He had been experimenting for years with a mix of herbs and spices that enhanced the natural flavor of the chicken without overpowering it. By 1935, his cooking had attracted enough local attention that Kentucky Governor Ruby Laffoon awarded him the honorary title of Colonel, a symbolic recognition given to notable citizens of the state. Sanders embraced the title, understanding instinctively that it gave him a unique identity and credibility. 2 years later, in 1937, he expanded his operation, opening Sanders Court and Cafe across from the service station. The cafe seated 142 customers, a significant size for a rural restaurant, and included a motel for overnight guests. Sanders wore a white suit and black string tie, presenting himself with a combination of formality and hospitality that made diners feel they were part of something special. In the late 1930s, he made what would be his most important culinary breakthrough. Traditional fried chicken took over 30 minutes to prepare, a problem for busy roadside service where customers were often in a hurry. Sanders began experimenting with a new device, the pressure cooker, which had been designed for cooking vegetables. By modifying it, he discovered he could fry chicken under pressure, drastically reducing cooking time to about 8 minutes while locking in flavor and moisture. It was during these years that Sanders finalized what he would call his original recipe, a secret blend of 11 herbs and spices. The exact combination became one of the most closely guarded trade secrets in the food industry. Sanders personally mixed the seasoning in batches and shipped it to his restaurant to ensure consistent quality. By the end of the decade, Sanders Court and Cafe was a well-known stop for travelers across Kentucky and neighboring states. Food critics, travel writers, and even politicians spoke of his fried chicken as something worth detouring for. The Colonel's hospitality, greeting guests, chatting with them about their journeys, and ensuring that every plate was perfect, became as much a part of the experience as the food itself. The stage was set for the next big leap, but the 1940s would bring new challenges: wartime shortages, changing travel patterns, and an increasingly competitive roadside dining market. Sanders would have to adapt quickly to survive, and he did so with the same ingenuity that had carried him this far. By the early 1940s, Harlan Sanders had transformed Sanders Court and Cafe from a modest roadside eatery into a regional landmark. Situated strategically along U.S. Route 25, the cafe became a hub for travelers heading south toward Tennessee or north toward Ohio. The property included a spacious dining room, a kitchen outfitted with multiple pressure fryers, and a motel for overnight guests. Sanders' reputation for serving high-quality meals quickly, without compromising flavor, was spreading across state lines. The centerpiece of his success was the original recipe, a proprietary blend of 11 herbs and spices, combined with a unique pressure frying method that sealed in moisture while producing a crispy, golden crust. Sanders kept the recipe a closely guarded secret, mixing the seasoning himself and delivering it to his restaurant in pre-measured packets. The secrecy added to the mystique of the brand. Customers not only enjoyed the flavor, but also the sense that they were eating something truly special. When World War II broke out in 1939 for the U.S., in 1941, Sanders faced challenges that could have crippled his business. Wartime rationing made it difficult to secure certain ingredients, particularly quality poultry and cooking oils. Gasoline rationing also reduced long-distance travel, cutting into the number of guests passing through Corbin. However, Sanders adapted by focusing more on local customers and refining his menu to work with available supplies. The post-war years brought a surge in travel, as Americans embraced the automobile lifestyle. The 1950s were the golden age of road trips, with families crisscrossing the country in new Chevrolets and Fords, stopping at motels and roadside diners. Sanders' business flourished in this environment. His cafe was often full, and his motel operated near capacity during peak travel seasons. But in 1954, Sanders received news that would change everything. The federal government had approved the construction of the new interstate highway system, and the planned route would bypass Corbin entirely. This meant that the steady stream of travelers on U.S. Route 25 would soon disappear. For a business dependent on highway traffic, the impact would be devastating. By 1955, traffic had dwindled, and Sanders, then 65 years old, was forced to sell his property. After paying off debts and taxes, he was left with little more than his savings and a small monthly Social Security check. Many would have seen this as the end of the road, a signal to retire quietly. Sanders, however, saw it as a challenge. He believed that his chicken recipe was too good to be confined to a single restaurant, especially one that no longer existed. He began to develop a new business model. Instead of owning restaurants himself, he would license other restaurateurs to use his recipe and cooking method in exchange for a royalty on each chicken sold. Packing his pressure cooker, bags of seasoning, and promotional materials into the trunk of his white Cadillac, Sanders hit the road once more. He traveled from town to town, visiting small diners and cafes, cooking his chicken for owners and staff. If they liked it, and most did, he offered them the chance to become a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisee. The terms were simple. The restaurant would buy Sanders' seasoning mix and use his pressure frying method. In return, Sanders would receive a small payment, typically 5 cents, for every chicken sold. This arrangement allowed him to scale his business without the overhead of owning or managing multiple locations. By the end of 1955, Sanders had signed several franchise agreements in Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. The concept was still in its infancy, but the groundwork had been laid for what would become one of the most successful franchise systems in the history of the food industry. In 1956, Harlan Sanders was living a life unlike that of most retirees. At 66 years old, he was driving thousands of miles each year across the United States and parts of Canada, sleeping in cheap motels or in his car, and knocking on the doors of restaurant owners to pitch his fried chicken concept. His white Cadillac was both his office and his delivery vehicle. In the trunk were a pressure cooker, bags of his secret seasoning, and a small suitcase of clothes. Sanders' approach to sales was as personal as his cooking. He would arrive at a diner, introduce himself politely as Colonel Harlan Sanders from Kentucky, and ask if he could cook a batch of chicken for the owner and staff. If they liked it, he'd explain the franchise arrangement. They would buy his seasoning mix, follow his method, and pay him a royalty of 5 cents for each chicken sold. In the early days, not everyone was interested. Some owners were skeptical about paying royalties, or thought fried chicken wasn't special enough to merit a dedicated brand. But Sanders' charm, persistence, and the undeniable quality of his product won over many. His confidence in his recipe was absolute. He would sometimes cook in the middle of a busy lunch service just to show how quickly and consistently his method worked. By the late 1950s, the franchise idea began to gain serious traction. The term, Kentucky Fried Chicken, started appearing on menus, giving the product a distinct identity. The phrase evoked Southern hospitality, tradition, and quality, all values Sanders wanted associated with his chicken. One of the most important relationships Sanders formed during this period was with Pete Harmon, a restaurant owner in Salt Lake City, Utah. Harmon's location was the first to use the Kentucky Fried Chicken name officially and to adopt a standardized branding approach. Harmon also introduced the iconic red and white bucket packaging, which made the product portable and instantly recognizable. The bucket became a symbol of family meals and convenience, boosting sales dramatically. By 1960, Sanders had over 200 franchise agreements in the United States and Canada. The business model was remarkably efficient. Sanders had no corporate headquarters, no salaried employees, and no company-owned restaurants. He worked from his car, kept franchise records in a briefcase, and mixed the seasoning himself in small batches that he shipped to franchisees. As the 1960s progressed, the fried chicken market was heating up. Competitors were emerging, and fast food chains like McDonald's and Burger King were rapidly expanding. Sanders realized that if KFC was to secure its place in the industry, it needed capital, infrastructure, and professional management. In 1964, at the age of 73, Sanders made a monumental decision. He sold Kentucky Fried Chicken to a group of investors led by John Y. Brown Jr. and Jack Massey for $2 million, equivalent to over $18 million today. The deal included a lifetime salary for Sanders, the role of brand ambassador, and a contractual guarantee that his original recipe would never be changed. The sale marked the beginning of a new era for KFC, with professional management, corporate marketing, and aggressive expansion plans. The chain was poised to move from a beloved regional brand to a national, and eventually global, fast food powerhouse. Yet even after the sale, Sanders refused to slow down. He traveled the country visiting franchise locations, inspecting kitchens, and meeting customers. His image, the white suit, black string tie, and goatee, became synonymous with the brand, ensuring that even as the company grew beyond his direct control, it never lost its connection to the man who started it all. When the new owners, John Y. Brown Jr. and Jack Massey, took over Kentucky Fried Chicken in 1964, they inherited more than just a fried chicken recipe. They inherited a living legend. Harlan Sanders was already a recognizable figure in his white suit and string tie, and the Colonel persona was central to the brand's appeal. Brown and Massey understood this perfectly and kept Sanders front and center in all marketing efforts. The mid-1960s were a period of unprecedented growth for KFC. Within just a few years, the number of outlets grew from around 600 to more than 3,500 worldwide. Expansion in the United States was rapid, with franchises opening in small towns and major cities alike. International growth followed close behind, with KFC entering markets such as Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, Mexico, and Japan. The company standardized everything: menu offerings, cooking equipment, signage, uniforms, and packaging. The red and white color scheme became instantly recognizable, and the "finger-licking good" slogan, introduced in the mid-1960s, became one of the most enduring taglines in advertising history. The bucket packaging, pioneered by Pete Harmon, was now a global icon. One of the key reasons for KFC's successful expansion was its ability to adapt to local tastes without losing its core identity. In Japan, for example, KFC introduced menu items like teriyaki chicken sandwiches and shrimp burgers. In the UK, chips, French fries replaced mashed potatoes as a default side. This flexibility allowed KFC to appeal to a wide variety of cultures while still delivering the original recipe, chicken as the centerpiece. But not everything was smooth behind the scenes. Sanders, though officially retired from management, remained deeply invested in the quality of the product and was unafraid to speak his mind. He traveled constantly, visiting franchise locations unannounced to inspect kitchens and sample the food. If something didn't meet his standards, he let the owners know, sometimes loudly and publicly. In the 1970s, these inspections sometimes led to friction with corporate management. Sanders criticized certain menu changes and accused the company of cutting corners to save money. In one infamous incident, he called KFC's gravy wallpaper paste and said it had been degraded from his original recipe. His bluntness occasionally caused public relations headaches, but it also reinforced his image as a man of principle who cared deeply about the product. In 1971, KFC was sold again, this time to the food conglomerate Houblein Incorporated. Under Houblein's ownership, KFC continued to grow, but Sanders' influence began to wane. The company was increasingly run by executives focused on maximizing profitability and expanding market share, sometimes at the expense of the founders' exacting standards. Despite the occasional disagreements, Sanders remained the face of KFC, appearing in commercials, print ads, and public events well into his late 80s. His personal appearances drew crowds, and customers saw him as the embodiment of Southern hospitality and culinary tradition. By the late 1970s, KFC had cemented its place as the world's largest chicken restaurant chain. It had also become a significant competitor to McDonald's and Burger King in the broader fast food market. In June 1980, Sanders was diagnosed with leukemia. Even as his health declined, he continued to make public appearances, insisting on wearing his trademark suit and greeting fans with warmth and humor. On December 16, 1980, Colonel Harlan Sanders passed away at the age of 90. He was given a state funeral in Kentucky, attended by thousands, and buried in Louisville's Cave Hill Cemetery. At the time of his death, KFC operated in over 48 countries, with more than 6,000 locations worldwide. The Colonel's legacy was secure. He had transformed a roadside cafe into a global brand, creating one of the most successful franchise models in history. After Colonel Sanders' death in 1980, KFC entered a new era, one without its charismatic founder, but still driven by his recipe and image. The 1980s were a period of corporate transitions, rapid globalization, and the beginnings of major shifts in the fast food landscape. In 1982, KFC's then owner, Houblein Incorporated, was acquired by R.J. Reynolds, a massive tobacco and food conglomerate. For Reynolds, KFC was just one brand in a sprawling portfolio, and while it received investment for expansion, it also became part of a much larger, more bureaucratic system. The company continued to grow internationally, but there was concern among franchisees and food critics that quality control was slipping. By the mid-1980s, the fast food industry was becoming intensely competitive. McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's were dominating the burger market, while other chicken chains like Popeyes and Church's Chicken were emerging as serious rivals to KFC. To compete, KFC began experimenting with new menu items, from chicken sandwiches to barbecued chicken, and tested alternative side dishes to appeal to changing consumer tastes. Some of these innovations succeeded. Others, like the short-lived Chicken Little sandwiches, faded quickly. A pivotal moment came in 1986 when R.J. Reynolds decided to sell KFC to PepsiCo, which already owned Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. PepsiCo brought deep marketing expertise, a powerful global distribution network, and experience managing large restaurant chains. For KFC, the move promised aggressive international expansion and stronger operational systems. PepsiCo quickly set its sights on Asia, seeing enormous growth potential in markets where Western fast food was still a novelty. The crown jewel of this strategy was China. In 1987, KFC opened its first Chinese location in Beijing, making it the first Western fast food chain to enter the country. The Beijing restaurant was a massive success from day one. Lines stretched around the block, and the novelty of American fried chicken made it a cultural sensation. KFC's success in China was due to more than just novelty. PepsiCo and its local partners took a unique approach. Instead of sticking rigidly to the U.S. menu, they adapted offerings to local tastes. Alongside the original recipe, chicken, customers could order congee for breakfast, spicy chicken wraps, and side dishes featuring rice, corn, and Chinese vegetables. This adaptability became a cornerstone of KFC's strategy in Asia and other culturally diverse markets. Back in the United States, however, KFC was facing challenges. While it remained the largest chicken chain, it was losing market share to more nimble competitors like Chick-fil-A, which emphasized fresh, made-from-scratch chicken sandwiches, and Popeyes, which promoted its spicier, Cajun-style flavors. KFC began modernizing its U.S. restaurants, introducing brighter interiors, updated signage, and drive-thru service to match the pace of modern life. In 1991, PepsiCo made a subtle but important branding change. The company shortened the name Kentucky Fried Chicken to simply KFC. The reasoning was twofold: to make the brand name snappier, and to avoid the negative connotations of the word fried, as health consciousness rose among consumers. While some critics claimed this was an attempt to hide the fried aspect of the product, KFC maintained that the new name was simply part of a modern brand identity. The 1990s also saw KFC expand aggressively into Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. In many of these markets, KFC became not just a place to eat, but a symbol of modernization and global culture. In Russia, the first Moscow location opened in 1993 to huge crowds. In South Africa, KFC became one of the most popular fast food brands after the end of apartheid. By the end of the 1990s, KFC had firmly established itself as a truly global brand. However, PepsiCo's growing restaurant empire was becoming difficult to manage alongside its core beverage business. In 1997, PepsiCo spun off its restaurant division into a new company called Tricon Global Restaurants, which included KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. This allowed the new entity to focus exclusively on the food industry without competing for resources with PepsiCo's drink brands. In 2002, Tricon rebranded as Yum! Brands, a name that would become synonymous with fast food dominance worldwide. KFC entered the 21st century with a strong international presence, a proven model for adapting to local markets, and ambitious plans to expand even further. Entering the 21st century, KFC was no longer just a fast food chain. It was a global institution. Under the ownership of Yum! Brands, formed in 2002 from the rebranding of Tricon Global Restaurants, KFC continued to expand its reach into new territories, strengthen its presence in existing markets, and modernize its brand for a new generation of consumers. Global expansion in the 2000s. In the early 2000s, KFC accelerated its growth in emerging markets, especially in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. China remained the crown jewel of KFC's empire. By 2008, it had over 2,000 locations in the country, far outpacing competitors like McDonald's. KFC's success in China was due to its deep localization strategy. Menus included Beijing chicken rolls, egg tarts, hot soy milk, and even spicy Sichuan-style wings. Restaurants in China were positioned not just as fast food outlets, but as comfortable, family-friendly dining spaces where people could linger. In India, KFC adapted to local tastes and dietary restrictions by introducing a variety of vegetarian items, spicy grilled chicken, and rice-based dishes. In Muslim-majority countries, the company emphasized halal certification and created region-specific menu items, like shawarma-style chicken wraps in the Middle East. Technological integration and modern marketing. By the mid-2000s, the rise of digital technology began to transform the restaurant industry. KFC embraced online ordering platforms, partnered with delivery services, and upgraded its drive-thru operations with digital menu boards and faster service times. Social media became a crucial marketing tool. KFC's Twitter account, for example, famously followed only 11 people: the 5 Spice Girls and 6 men named Herb, a clever nod to the 11 herbs and spices in its recipe. This playful approach to branding helped KFC connect with younger audiences. The company also experimented with bold, sometimes unconventional advertising campaigns, from tongue-in-cheek celebrity portrayals of Colonel Sanders in the U.S., including actors like Norm Macdonald, Jim Gaffigan, and even singer Reba McEntire, to region-specific humor in markets like Japan and Australia. Australia, KFC leaned into the Colonel's persona as both a heritage figure and a source of fun, menu innovations, and health trends. As health consciousness grew in the 2010s, KFC faced the challenge of balancing indulgence with healthier options. The chain introduced grilled chicken, reduced fat sides, and smaller portion sizes in some markets. In 2019, KFC began testing plant-based fried chicken in partnership with Beyond Meat, responding to the growing demand for alternative proteins. However, KFC never abandoned its core product. The original recipe, fried chicken, remained the star of the menu, often featured in limited-time offers alongside creative new dishes, from Nashville hot chicken in the U.S. to double-down sandwiches in multiple countries. Cultural phenomena and local traditions. In some countries, KFC became part of local traditions. In Japan, the Kentucky for Christmas campaign, started in the 1970s, turned KFC into the country's go-to Christmas Eve meal. Families place orders weeks in advance, and long lines form outside stores during the holiday season. In Ghana, KFC became a status symbol associated with special occasions and urban lifestyle. The COVID-19 pandemic and operational adaptation. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 brought unprecedented challenges to the restaurant industry. For KFC, dining closures meant a pivot toward contactless delivery, curbside pickup, and increased drive-thru capacity. The company temporarily dropped its "finger-licking good" slogan, acknowledging health guidelines, but brought it back in 2021 once conditions improved. Digital sales soared during this period, and KFC invested heavily in mobile app development and loyalty programs. The brand also introduced limited menu crisis modes in some markets to streamline operations during staffing shortages and supply chain disruptions. Sustainability and the future. In the 2020s, sustainability became a key focus. KFC committed to sourcing 100% of its packaging from renewable or recyclable sources by 2025 and reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. Some markets began trialing reusable packaging programs, and others switched to biodegradable containers. By 2023, KFC operated over 27,000 restaurants in more than 150 countries, making it one of the largest fast food chains in the world. The brand's strength lay in its ability to stay true to its core, the original recipe, while adapting to cultural preferences, technological shifts, and global challenges. From a small roadside cafe in Corbin, Kentucky, to a multi-billion-dollar global powerhouse, the story of KFC is one of persistence, adaptation, and brand mastery. Harlan Sanders' journey, from a boy cooking for his siblings to an elderly man selling his recipe from the trunk of his car, remains one of the most inspiring business stories in history. Today, every bucket of KFC chicken carries a piece of that legacy, a reminder that great ideas, paired with relentless determination, can truly change the world.